The Kindergarten Eurostrade's number glowed on his phone screen, and the world stopped. That one simple notification was enough to shatter the fragile peace Justin had so painstakingly built. His blood turned to ice, his breath catching in his throat like a shard of glass. He answered, his hand trembling so violently he could barely hold the phone to his ear. The teacher Eurostrade's voice was a frantic, distant buzz, the words tumbling out in a panicked rush. Can't find him. Playing in the yard. Then he was gone. Gone. The word was a black hole, sucking all the air, all the light, all the hope from the small cafe tilde copyright. Justina Eurostrade's legs gave out, and he slammed against the counter, the only thing holding him upright. His son, his Danny, taken. The universe, in its infinite cruelty, chose that exact moment for his phone to ring again. An unknown number. A cold, sickening certainty coiled in the pit of his stomach. He knew who it was. Answering that call was like willingly stepping off a cliff, but he had no choice. He swiped to answer, and then he heard it. The voice that had haunted his nightmares for 2 long years. A voice like gravel and smoke, dripping with a possessiveness that made his skin crawl. Hello, Justin. Alan. The name was a curse, a brand seared into his soul. A sob tore from Justina Eurostrade's chest, raw and desperate. Alan. Where is he? Where is my son? A low, cruel chuckle echoed down the line, a sound designed to break him. He's with me, where he belongs. Where you belong. Alarna Eurostrade's voice hardened, the faux pleasantry melting away to reveal the monster beneath. You thought you could run. Start over. You're mine, Justin. And so is the boy. Come home, come alone, and don't Eurostrade tell anyone, or I swear, you will live to regret it. The line went dead, leaving Justin in a silence more terrifying than any scream, clutching a dead phone and the ruins of his world. Before this moment of absolute terror, Justina Eurostrade's world had been defined by a much gentler aroma, the rich, dark scent of coffee. It was the foundation of his new existence, a fragrant fortress against the ghosts of his past. The steady hiss of the espresso machine, the comforting warmth of a ceramic mug in his hands, the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of tamping down the ground to euros. These were the rituals that kept the chaos at bay. 6 days a week, he moved through the small cafe tilde copyright, a ghost in a barista Eurostrade's apron, his movements economical and practiced. He poured intricate latte art he didn't feel, steamed milk to a perfect temperature he couldn't appreciate, and polished the counters until they reflected a tired, hollowed-out version of himself. This wasn't a life of ambition or passion. It was a life of survival. It was quiet. It was anonymous. And most importantly, it was 1,000 miles and a lifetime away from the man he had escaped. Just 2 years prior, Justina Eurostrade's reality had been a prison built by an alpha named Alan. It wasn't a Eurostrade a life, but a slow, suffocating erosion of the self. Alarna Eurostrade's presence was a storm that filled every room, his booming voice an order, his heavy hand a constant, looming threat. He hadn't loved Justin, he had owned him. The memories were not gentle phantoms, they were predators with sharp claws and teeth, tearing at the scar tissue of his soul in the quiet hours of the night. He Eurostrade stayed for far too long, tangled in a web of fear and the desperate, foolish hope that the monster would somehow transform back into the man he thought he Eurostrade loved. The breaking point, the catalyst that had finally given him the strength to sever the chains, hadn't been for himself. It had been for Danny. It was the day he saw a flicker of his own terror reflected in his Sona Eurostrade's wide, innocent eyes as Alarna Eurostrade's temper flared. That reflection was a mirror he could no longer ignore. That very night, under the cloak of a moonless sky, Justin had taken his Sona Eurostrade's small, trusting hand, slipped out the back door of their gilded cage, and ran without ever looking back. Their sanctuary was an unassuming town, a place perfectly calibrated for disappearing. It was large enough to be anonymous, but small enough to feel contained. He found a cramped, two-bedroom apartment tucked away above a laundromat. It perpetually smelled of bleach and fabric softener, a clean, chemical scent that was a welcome replacement for the cloying, dominant musk of his former life. It was small, it was shabby, but it was theirs. It was safe. He secured the job at the Daily Grind, owned by Clara, a kind-eyed beater woman who saw the desperation in his gaze and had the grace not to ask the questions he couldn't answer. His entire existence was now a simple, brutal equation: work, pay rent, buy food, and wrap his son in a cocoon of love so thick that the shadows of the past could never touch him. The concept of love for himself, of a partnership, was an alien language from a dead planet. His heart was a shattered thing, clumsily glued back together, too fragile to ever be offered to anyone again. It certainly wasn't in the market for a mate. The jingle of the bell above the Cafe Tilder copyright door was a constant, punctuating his days. Each ring signaled another customer, another transaction, another opportunity to hide behind the veneer of polite, professional service. He had perfected the tired but friendly smile, a mask that kept the world at a comfortable distance. His eyes would sweep across the familiar landscape of regulars, the old men rustling their newspapers, the college students illuminated by the blue glow of their laptops, the hurried office workers in need of their liquid courage. Among them, one had become a fixed point in his daily orbit. He was a tall alpha, with a lean build that his slightly rumpled suits couldn't quite conceal, and eyes that held a surprising kindness. Every morning, like clockwork, at 8:15 a.m., he would appear. His order was always the same: a large black coffee. No fuss, no demands, no projecting an aura of dominance that made the air crackle. He was Euro's quiet, reserved even. Justin had long ago registered the way the Alpha Eurostrade's gaze would sometimes find him and linger for a beat too long. The way a soft, almost shy smile would touch his lips if their eyes happened to meet over the hiss of the steam wand. Justin categorized these observations under a mental file labeled dangerous and irrelevant and moved on. His world was a fortress, and its walls were too high for such complications. One morning, the quiet Alpha stood before him. "Good morning." His voice was a low, smooth baritone that was surprisingly calming. "Morning," Justin replied automatically, his hands already moving, grabbing a large cup. "The usual, please," the Alpha confirmed, that small, genuine smile appearing again. It was a nice smile, Justin noted with a detached sort of annoyance. It actually reached his eyes. "Busy morning." Justina Eurostrade's gaze flickered around the bustling Cafe Tilder copyright. "Ita Eurostrade's steady," he answered, his focus on scooping and grinding the coffee beans. His responses were an art form of polite dismissal. He had spent a lifetime mastering the skill of being uninteresting, of deflecting any and all personal inquiry. "Farter Eurostrade's good for business," the Alpha remarked, his eyes following the swirling pattern Justin created as he poured hot water over the grounds. "It looks like hard work. Someone has to keep the city caffeinated," Justin said with a practiced, impersonal lightness, placing the finished cup on the counter. Will that be all for you? Yes, thank you. Just this, the Alpha said, reaching for the cup. For a fraction of a second, their fingers brushed against the warm cardboard. A jolt, a tiny, unexpected spark of warmth, shot up Justina Eurostrade's arm. He recoiled as if he Eurostrade been burned, snatching his hand back. Have a good day, Justin said quickly, his voice a little too sharp as he turned his attention to the next person in line. You too, the Alpha Eurostrade's voice followed him, and Justin could hear the faint note of disappointment, a subtle deflation he chose to deliberately ignore. He had more coffee to make. This silent, one-sided dance continued for weeks. The Alpha Euro's Brian, Justin had learned his name from a CR card receipt left on the counter. Euros remained a constant, gentle presence. He would offer small conversational openings, a comment about the rain, a question about the song playing on the cafe copyright a circumflex Eurostrade's speakers. Justin would respond with unwavering politeness and brevity, a master of building invisible walls with pleasantries. He treated all customers with the same professional warmth. He just ensured his warmth toward Brian never reached above a carefully controlled room temperature. Yet, he was acutely aware of the Alpha Eurostrade's persistent, gentle interest. He would see Brian at his usual table by the window, laptop open, but eyes drifting over to watch Justin work. It wasn't a predatory stare, it was softer, more curious, almost vulnerable. Whenever Justin caught him, Brian would quickly look down, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. It was profoundly confusing. Justin had only known Alphas to be forces of nature like Alarna Euro's, overwhelming, demanding, inescapable. Brian was an anomaly, a quiet stream in a world where he was used to hurricanes. This gentle, persistent interest was a variable in his carefully controlled equation, and it made him deeply, deeply uncomfortable. The afternoon the world tilted on its axis started like any other. Brian was at his table, typing away, the cafe copyright in its typical post-lunch lull. Justin was methodically cleaning the espresso machine when a frantic buzzing started in his pocket. He pulled out his phone, the Kindergartener Eurostrade's number, a fist of pure ice clenched around his stomach. Denny, he answered, his voice already tight with a premonition of dread. Hello? The teacher's words were a blur of panic and professional concern. Euro's fever, vomiting. He needed to be picked up immediately. Justina Eurostrade's mind went white with a terror that was sharp and cold and absolute. His son was sick. His baby was in pain. He needed to go. Now. His hands shook as he fumbled for his keys, his carefully constructed composure shattering into a million pieces. Clara was out for the day. He couldn't just abandon the shop. What was he going to do? The terrifying, familiar weight of being completely and utterly alone crashed down on him, stealing his breath. Justin, are you okay? Were Eurostrade as white as a sheet? He hadn't Eurostrade even noticed Brian approach the counter. Justin flinched, startled, looking up at the Alpha with wide, frantic eyes. My son, he managed to choke out the words, thick and strangled. He's sick. At his school. I have to go, but I can't leave. His voice trailed off as his desperate gaze swept around the empty cafe copyright. Brianna Eurostrade's expression shifted instantly, all traces of polite distance replaced by genuine, immediate concern. He didn't Eurostrade ask why there was no one else to call, why he couldn't Eurostrade just close up. He just acted. Go, he said, his voice firm but gentle. Go to your son. I can watch the shop until Clara gets back. Or I can lock up for you, whatever you need. You can't, Justin stammered, his mind reeling. You have your own work to do. My work can wait, Brian said, already taking off his suit jacket and rolling up his sleeves. Your son needs you. Tharter Euros trade s water Euros trade s important. Go. He took a half step closer, his hand hovering in the space near Justina Euros trade s arm, an unspoken offer of support that was so foreign it felt like a dream. This simple, unquestioning offer of help was a battering ram against the walls Justin had spent 2 years building. He just stared at Brian, utterly dumbfounded. People didn't just do this. Alphas didn't do this for Omegers they barely knew. Alan would have called it an inconvenience, a weakness to be punished. But the register, the keys, Justin mumbled, still struggling to process the kindness. Don't worry about any of it, Brian said, his voice a steady anchor in Justina Euros trade sea of panic. Just go. Do you have a way to get there? Justin blinked, the practical question cutting through his haze. A car? Of course he didn't have a car. The kindergarten was a 30-minute bus ride away, an impossible distance to cross quickly. No, I don't have a car. I do, Brian said, already moving toward the door with purpose. Come on, let's go get him. He didn't wait for permission. He just led the way. Justin, swept up in a current of shock and gratitude, grabbed his jacket and followed, a barely audible thank you escaping his lips. The drive was a blur. Brianna Euros trade's car was clean and unassuming, and he drove with a quiet competence that was oddly reassuring. Justin sat rigidly in the passenger seat, his hands twisted into knots in his lap, every traffic light a personal torment. Euros trade's going to be okay, Brian said softly, his voice cutting through Justina Euros trade's spiraling anxiety. Kids are resilient. They bounce back from these things. I know, Justin whispered, but his voice shook with a fear he couldn't Euros trade contain. At the kindergarten, he practically leaped from the car, sprinting inside. He found Danny in the nurse's office, a small, pathetic bundle wrapped in a scratchy blanket, his face pale and his eyes glassy with fever. The sight of his son, so small and vulnerable, was a physical blow to Justina Euros trade's heart. He swept him up into his arms, murmuring reassurances against his hot forehead, the world narrowing to just the two of them. Brian stood quietly in the doorway, a silent, unwavering pillar of support. He didn't Euros trade intrude, didn't Euros trade offer platitudes. He just waited. He needs a doctor, Justin said, his voice firm with parental resolve. Okay, Brian replied without a moment Euros trade's hesitation. Where to? The next few hours were a dizzying whirlwind of clinic waiting rooms, the sterile smell of antiseptic, and the gentle probing of a doctor. And through it all, Brian stayed. He didn't just wait in the car, he sat with them, a calm and steady presence in the chaotic storm of Justina Euros trade's worry. He found a quiet cartoon on his phone to distract a whimpering Danny. He went and got Justin a bottle of water he hadn't realized he desperately needed. He was just Euros there. For the first time in years, Justin found himself leaning on someone else, and the world didn't collapse. The doctor diagnosed a common stomach virus and sent them home with instructions for rest and fluids. By the time they reached Justina Euros trade's apartment building, Danny was fast asleep in the back seat, his small body finally succumbing to exhaustion. Brian insisted on helping carry him upstairs, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he maneuvered the sleeping child. He didn't comment on the cramped apartment or the faint smell of laundry detergent. His focus was solely on getting Danny settled safely into his bed. Once Danny was tucked in, a profound silence fell between them in the small living room. The adrenaline that had been fueling Justin for hours finally receded, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. He turned to face the alpha, who was still standing awkwardly by the door. "Brian," he began, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. "Euros, I don't know how to thank you for everything. The ride, closing the shop, staying with us at the clinic. Euros, you didn't have to do any of that." Brian offered a small, almost shy shrug. "I wanted to help. It was no trouble." "It wasn't nothing," Justin insisted, looking Euros at him for the first time. He saw the kindness etched around his eyes, the quiet strength in his posture. Most people wouldn't have bothered, especially for a stranger. Brian hesitated, his gaze meeting Justin's directly. "I wanted to," he said again, with a simple sincerity that felt more powerful than any grand declaration. "I've been wanting to get to know you for a while, but you always seem so Euros guarded." He said it without judgment, a simple observation. A flush of heat crept up Justina Eurostrade's neck. He was guarded. He had to be. "I'm sorry," he said, the apology heartfelt. "It's not personal. It's been just me and Danny for so long. My focus has to be on him. On Euros making it." Brian nodded, his expression full of an understanding Justin hadn't expected. "I can only imagine how difficult that must be," he said softly. "It takes a lot of strength to do what you're doing." Strength. Justin felt like he was perpetually one crisis away from shattering into dust. "I'm just doing what any parent would do," he mumbled, looking down at his worn-out shoes. "It still takes strength," Brian repeated gently. "And Justina Euros, you don't always have to do it all by yourself." The offer was there, hanging in the quiet space between them. Not a proposition, but a lifeline. The thought was terrifying, but it also felt like the first ray of sunshine after a long, brutal winter. "I'm not used to people being Euros kind," Justin admitted, the words tumbling out before he could censor them. "It makes me suspicious. Because of my ex, I suppose." He immediately regretted it, the mention of Alan feeling like a betrayal of his own hard-won safety. But Brian didn't pry. He just nodded again. "Bad experiences have a way of doing that," he said. Then, he looked Justin straight in the eye, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not him, Justin." The quiet power in those 4 words disarmed Justin completely. In Brian's open, honest face, he saw not a threat, but a promise. And for the first time, a tiny, fragile seed of trust began to sprout in the barren soil of his heart. "I know," he whispered back. He didn't really know, not for certain, but he felt it. He felt it in the gentle way Brian had handled his son, in the unquestioning way he had offered his help. When Brian finally moved to leave, a new, tentative energy filled the space between them. "Could Euros, would you mind if I called you sometime?" Brian asked, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "Just to check on Danny." "And Euros on you?" Justin's heart did a strange little flip in his chest. A simple request, yet it felt monumental. He took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes," he said, a real, genuine smile finally reaching his own eyes. "I'd like that." The phone call that evening was the first of many. Brianna Eurostrade's calls became a small, bright spot in Justina Eurostrade's exhausting days. They were easy, comfortable conversations. He asked about Danny's recovery, about Justin's day, and he actually listened to the answers. He remembered the small details Justin shared. Slowly, painstakingly, Justin began to lower his drawbridge. Then came the invitation, delivered with that same gentle hesitation. "I was wondering, Euros, if you're not busy, Euros, would you consider having dinner with me? A date?" The word sent a jolt of panic through him, his first instinct to retreat. But then he thought of Brianna Eurostrade's quiet patience, of his unwavering kindness. He thought of the profound loneliness that was his constant companion. "Are Euros more than friends?" Justin asked, surprising himself with his own boldness. A beat of silence, and then Brian's voice, warm with relief and pleasure. "That's exactly what I'd like, Justin." Their relationship bloomed cautiously, like a flower in early spring. Their dates were simple and sweet. A quiet dinner where Brian didn't try to dominate or control, but simply offered his hand across the table, a silent gesture of connection that Justin, after a moment Eurostrade's hesitation, accepted. Trips to the park became a regular occurrence. Justin would watch, his heart aching with a strange, unfamiliar joy, as Brian pushed Danny on the swings, his rich, genuine laughter mingling with his son's delighted squeals. Brian wasn't just tolerating Danny to get to him, he was actively engaging with him, treating him with a respect and sweetness that was a balm to Justin's wounded soul. Seeing his son, who had once been so timid, now laughing and playing freely around an Alfred Euros, it was the most powerful healing he could have imagined. Love, the word started to whisper in the back of his mind. It was a terrifying, exhilarating thought, but with Brian, it didn't feel like a cage. It felt like coming home. He was finally beginning to imagine a future, one that included this kind, gentle Alfred. A future where he wasn't alone. A future where he and Danny were not just surviving, but thriving. The hope was so bright it was almost painful. It was this hope that made the eventual crash so devastating. The phone call from the kindergarten, the frantic teacher, the word gone. And then Alan's voice, a serpent whispering poison into his ear, yanking him violently back into the nightmare he thought he had escaped. He was being summoned back to the old apartment, the site of so much pain, with his son's life as the collateral. He had to go. He had to walk back into the lion's den. Meanwhile, across town, Brianna Eurostrade's phone rang. It was the kindergarten. The teacher, unable to reach Justin, had called the only other number she could think of for Euros. The man who had helped that day Justina Eurostrade's son was sick. "Danny is missing," she said, and the word hit Brian like a physical blow. Missing. His mind instantly flashed to Justin's guardedness, his fear, the veiled references to his ex. A cold dread solidified in his gut. This wasn't a random event. This was the past, coming to collect a debt. Acting on pure, protective instinct, he got the old address from Danny's emergency contact file. The name listed for the father was Alan. He told the teacher to call the police, but he didn't wait. He couldn't. He drove like a man possessed, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, a fierce, primal instinct overriding his gentle nature. He was not a fighter, not a hero. He was just a man who had finally found something worth fighting for. The apartment building was even more rundown than he Eurostrade imagined. He found the door and heard the voices from within a Euros and Alfred's enraged roar, and a childer Eurostrade's terrified sobs. There was no time. He smashed the small hallway window, unlocked the door from the inside, and burst in. The scene was a living nightmare. Justin was bound to a chair, gagged, his eyes wide with pure terror. Danny was huddled in a corner, crying, and standing over them was a mountain of an Alfer, his face twisted in a mask of rage. "Who the hell are you?" Alan roared. Brian ignored him, his focus entirely on Justin and Danny. "Let them go," he said, his voice shaking but firm. Alan laughed, a vile, ugly sound. "Come for my Omega, have you?" he sneered, stalking toward Brian. "He's not yours," Brian retorted, placing himself between the monster and his victims. The fight was brutal and one-sided. Alan was a storm of pure, violent rage. Brian was outmatched, overwhelmed. A fist connected with his jaw, and the world exploded in a flash of white-hot pain. He tasted blood. Another blow landed in his ribs, stealing his breath. He was falling, the floor rushing up to meet him. Alarna Eurostrade's enraged shouts, and Dana Eurostrade's heartbreaking sobs echoing in his ears. Through a haze of pain, he saw Alan turn back toward Justin, his hand raised to strike. And in that split second, with Alarna Eurostrade's back turned, a surge of pure, desperate adrenaline flooded Brianna Eurostrade's system. He scrambled to his feet, grabbed the heaviest thing he could reach, a heavy ceramic lamp, and swung with every last ounce of his strength. The lamp connected with the back of Alarna Eurostrade's head with a sickening crack. The monster stumbled, a look of shock on his face, before collapsing in a heap on the floor. And then, there was silence. A profound, ringing silence, broken only by the sound of Brian's ragged breaths and Justina Eurostrade's muffled, desperate sobs of relief. Brian, bruised and bleeding, stumbled over to Justin and quickly untied him. The moment he was free, Justin ripped the gag from his mouth and scrambled across the floor to Danny, enveloping his sobbing son in his arms, shielding him from the sight of the unconscious man on the floor. He held his child, rocking him back and forth, whispering reassurances that were as much for himself as they were for Danny. After a long moment, once Dana Eurostrade's cries had subsided to whimpers, Justin looked up. His tear-filled eyes found Brian, who was leaning against the wall, wincing in pain. He looked at the blood on Brianna Eurostrade's lip, the swelling bruise on his cheek, the sheer exhaustion on his face. This gentle, quiet man had walked into hell for them. He had faced down a monster and won. Justina Eurostrade's heart, the bruised and broken thing he had guarded so fiercely, cracked wide open. And all that poured out was a love so fierce and overwhelming it left him breathless. He had run from one Alfer only to be saved by another. He had found his safety not in solitude but in the arms of a man who had shown him what true strength and true love really was. The wail of police sirens grew louder, a welcome sound signaling the true end of their nightmare. Justin, still holding Danny tight, looked at Brian, and for the first time, their future wasn't a terrifying question mark. It was a promise, reflected in the eyes of the man who had just saved them both. So, what do you think the future holds for Justin, Brian, and little Danny after this? Do you believe they finally found their happily ever after? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story and want to see more like it, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out and ensures you won't miss our next story. Thanks for watching.